Well, good evening, everyone. I understand we have a full house tonight. Good. But first, a word from our sponsor. I want to alert you to the fact that all of my talks are available on YouTube. If you go to our website, pull down the Concerts tab, you'll see a Performance Insights link there. If you go there, you'll get another link that goes to an archive of all the talks that I've given back to 2020. So I encourage you, if you've missed one, if you want to fact check me, which I encourage, go and look at them. They're about half hour, 35 minutes each. There we go. Imani wins is our performance tonight, and they're doing a program called De Memorias, from memory, a Latin perspective. The Imani Winds were formed back in 1997, and they're committed to performing and commissioning new music. There is obviously a 19th century bolus of music for wind quintet, but to provide new music for the ensembles is one of their prime things that they want to do. Now, Imani, the word Imani, is Swahili for faith. They've commissioned works from 31 different composers, and they've recorded 9 CDs. They got a 2022 Grammy nomination for the Best Chamber Music Small Ensemble Performance. And in 2021, they joined the faculty of Curtis Institute as they're the only and first ever faculty wind quintet. It's interesting, I think every concert so far, we've had some connection to Curtis. And here we have another one. And our next one also has a Curtis connection. So the wind quintet started in the late 18th century, early 19th century, and it's, by these two people, Anton Reicha and Franz Danzi. Reicha was born in Prague, but he became a naturalized French citizen. He wrote 24 wind quintets. He was a friend of Beethoven. He taught Liszt, Berlioz, and César Franck. And Danzi wrote 9 quintets. He was a German cellist, friend of Mozart. And so these quintets of Reicha and Danzi formed the initial bolus of quintets that are still part of the repertoire, are still played today. In the middle of the late 19th century, this form of the wind quintet fell out of favor. But in the 20th century, it started to gain new composers that would write for it. And today, their program today is going to offer a wide range of 20th and 21st century composers, from traditional music to the avant-garde. And I'll talk more about the avant-garde part of it as we go along. The first thing on the program is Paquito de Rivera, La Fleur de Cayenne. De Rivera was a virtuoso saxophone and clarinetist from Cuba. He was born in Havana in 1948. He started sax lessons with his father at the age of 5. He went into the Havana Conservatory of Music and studied both saxophone and clarinet. And at age 17, he performed as soloist with the Cuban National Symphony Orchestra. So he's quite a prodigy. In 1980, he defected to the United States, where he lives now. He's awarded 14 Grammys as a composer and a performer. And La Fleur de Cayenne is this large hibiscus. So the name of the piece is named after this flower. And it's one of his most popular works. And it's been arranged for every type of ensemble. I think it was originally written for flute and piano, but every kind of ensemble up to big bands play it. So here's an arrangement that he made of it for 4 clarinets, and he himself is playing the lead clarinet. Very infectious piece, good way to start a program off. And we come to the next one. This is the most recent of today's works. Tania León, De Memorias, after which the whole program is devoted to, of memories. She was born in Havana also, and came to the United States in her early 20s. In 1969, she was a founding member of the Dance Theater of Harlem. From 1993 to 97, she was a new music advisor to Kurt Masur and the New York Philharmonic. She's been a visiting lecturer at Harvard University and a visiting professor of composition at Yale. And in 2021, she received the Pulitzer Prize in Music. Now, speaking of this piece, De Memorias, she says, it's dedicated to my teacher, Cuban composer Alfredo Diaz Nieto. It has the sensation of days gone by, of my own memories so familiar that I know them by memory. The work is marked by the use of insistent accents over which are woven contrasting lyrical fragments. Now, in listening to this work and learning it myself, I think the operative word that you'll find listening to it is fragments. This is not one continuous melody. These are fragments that are placed over top of percussive sounding staccato rhythms. Don't expect to hear sentimental or recognizable melodies. This is a real avant-garde work, and it makes use of extensive extra musical effects. And it's one of those pieces that's difficult to understand at first listening. And I've played many works like this, and even as a performer, you don't really start to understand it until you've worked at it, played through it, rehearsed it many times. Then it starts to reveal itself. So don't be discouraged if it doesn't make sense to you the first time. But I'll try to lead you through some of the things that you're going to hear, and hopefully it will. And it's so difficult, I think, that I would imagine that everybody is playing from the full score. Usually when you have a piece of a quintet, like in the 19th century, all you have in front of you is your part. Like the oboe player has the oboe part, but it moves along at a steady pace, so the beat, that 1, 2, 3, 4 is what keeps everything together. But this is so improvisational, and the score is so complex that I would imagine you have to play from the full score, because you have to see what everybody's doing at a certain point in time. And the only way to know that is to see everybody's part. So let's have a look at what some of this looks like. You have, from the top to the bottom, flute, oboe, clarinet, bassoon, horn, and bassoon. So you see there's no time signature. And what is this here? I mean, it's flute stems, but there's no note heads. At the bottom of the page, it says flute, blowing while fingering any note within this contour. Now, usually when you play a flute, you blow across the hole like a Coke bottle. In this instance, put the whole mouth over the hole and just blow air into it and finger notes. And you'll hear it, it's quite a different sound. Let me just play a little bit of that so you can hear. Hear that? You see what I mean by having to see what people are doing rather than having it memorized. And you'll notice too that there's nothing in these lines, but you heard horn and oboe, because on the first page they had one bar of rhythm and their instruction was just keep playing it. So here are some of the extended techniques that they're called upon to play in this piece. Here's another flute part. Here's the sighing, the bending of the notes. But the flute is just kind of puffing into the hole while fingering any note that's within that contour. Here's the bassoon bending pitches. And you'll probably recognize this effect in the clarinet. Sounds like Rhapsody in Blue. And the horn is told to flutter tongue while blowing. Now that's funny. That technique is a genetic thing. Some people can't do that. I had a horn player friend. He's still playing horn. He can't do that. I said, well, what do you do? Because you have to do it at some point. What do you do? He said he learned to do it in his throat. So here's the where are we? 9. Flutter tongue. There's another thing that's called for is trill on the same note. Usually a trill was either a note above or note below. But on some instruments, you play a note and you can just flap a key below. You'll get what sounds like a trill, but the note doesn't change. And here's an example of that. Did you hear that? Did you hear the wah, 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 wah? Play it again. And the oboe gets into some glisses too. That's particularly hard to do on the oboe because it doesn't, you can't bend the note as much as, say, the clarinet or the horn or the flute can. So there's not a wide, you can't go, or you can't do what the clarinet did. The piece ends with a section of punctuated spaced chords. So I'll play you that. That's it. It lasts about 8 minutes. I'm going to say I hope you enjoy it, but it's not one of those pieces that you can say, oh, I enjoyed that. It not because it's not enjoyable on some level, but like I said, it takes work. It takes work to understand a piece like this. And I've been listening to it for 2-3 weeks now, and I can't say that I really understand it. So it kind of sounds like damning with faint praise. All right, let's move on. The next piece on the program is Heitor Villalobos, a trio for clarinet, flute, and bassoon. This is a really, really virtuoso piece. The instruments are given great expressive melodies to play, but not in the sense of romantic melodies. This is still a contemporary piece. Villalobos sought to replace European romanticism with something that was uniquely Brazilian, nationalistic, using Brazilian's own vocabulary. He wrote a group of pieces called Baquianas Brasileiras, which were a series of 9 compositions that fused Brazilian musical ideas in the style of Bach. The most popular one is number 5 for soprano and 8 cellos. There's one for orchestra, there's one for piano, there's one for flute and bassoon, one for choir and string orchestra, and another one for 8 cellos. Now, no matter how much he wanted to divorce himself from the influence of European music, there's no denying the influence of Stravinsky, and it's specifically the Rite of Spring on this piece. In the Rite of Spring, Stravinsky was trying to depict pagan Russian rituals. But in this piece, you can hear what I would call pagan Brazilian rituals. There's no quotes, but it's just purely Brazilian in its sound. And of course, he's not the first composer to have been influenced by the Rite of Spring. I mean, that was a seminal work that is still one of the core pieces of concert literature. This is the longest piece on the first half. It lasts for about 20 minutes. So let's hear a little bit of the beginning of the Villalobos. Sounds particularly Brazilian, South American, and then with the oboe, the chant-like melody over everything, gives it a quasi-ritual feel. There are insistent staccato notes. You heard the beginning of the clarinet and the bassoon. That is all the way through this movement, and it drives it forward. It gives the work impetus. I'm going to play that again a little bit. I want you to take note of the oboe melody that's played there. Sorry, that was the wrong one. Here. This is the oboe theme. Now here, if you listen closely, you can hear that oboe theme in the middle of the texture. Can you hear the oboe in there? That's the same thing that the oboe was playing, but it was a more prominent part. And this movement, you'll hear a lot of that. The lines will almost disappear, but they're in there. They're in there somewhere. This is the end of the first movement. And the start of the second movement is very much like the first. You have chords in the bassoon and the clarinet with the oboe weaving a melody on top. And again, more staccato chords driving the piece forward. And the beginning of the third movement, again, is very similar to what we've heard. And it's hard not to hear the rite of spring in this. Here's a little bit of the Stravinsky Rite of Spring. Again, you can hear that he was influenced, maybe subconsciously, maybe consciously, of this seminal piece. This is the end of the trio. Again, this insistent rhythm that drives the whole work on. Okay, time for a big gear shift. Alfredo La Rocha Viana Filho, also known as Pixinguinha. He was Brazilian. He learned music at home with the rest of his family. Got his first acting job when he was 12 in cabarets and in cinema orchestras. 1-0 means 1-0. It's a score of a famous soccer match in which Brazil defeated Paraguay. So it's a big famous piece, and it actually has words. It's one of his most popular compositions, and it's very, very infectious. Now we have another gear shift. This is Manuel del Aguila, born in Uruguay. In the early 20s, he moved to California, studied at the San Francisco Conservatory, and later in Vienna. And he currently lives in Seattle. This is the longest work on the second half. It's about 24 minutes. Compared to the Leon, it's a much more conventional piece, although still there are some unusual and extra musical effects that he calls for. The first movement is, they all have 4 movements. Each one of them has a name. First movement is subtitled Back in Time, and has a feeling of recalling past memories. And one of the things you'll notice right away is that there are melodies that you can sing. And in fact, that's what the quintet is told to do. They're told to sing. So let's hear how that plays out. Now that particular theme gets passed around all through this movement. Here's another example. Now that opening theme was in there. It wasn't necessarily on the top, but it was in there. It continues on in this vein, and then we get a recap of the opening theme. There. Now, as the first movement goes into the second movement, it goes without pause, and you'll hear some extra musical effects that are called for here. More singing. Now, the three effects that you heard there, the first is the pop, pop, you sounds like somebody tapping their foot. But the horn player is actually tapping the end of his mouthpiece. And that just makes, it starts the tubing resonating and makes those pops. The other thing you hear is the flute probably just popping of fingers on the low notes of the flute to make it sound like that. But there's this raspy sound. That's the oboist sucking on the reed. Okay, the next movement is titled In Heaven. Now, I'm not sure what he thinks heaven is, but as you hear this, you'll say, oh, he's like a night out at a dance club. So you'll see what I mean. Now, this theme just keeps developing and developing. It gets more raucous and more raucous, and until all at once you hear what sounds like a police whistle. And the whole thing just calms down, the tempo relaxes. Same theme. And it continues like that until the end. You even get a cha-cha-cha at the end. That's heaven. The next movement is entitled Under the Earth, and it highlights all the low notes of the instrument, especially the horn, bassoon, and clarinet. Dark, sinister sounds. Bending notes again. Then there is a section that the flute is called to take off the head joint and just blow the head joint without the rest of the keys attached. It sounds owl-like. It accentuates the darkness of the movement. And the movement ends in the same vein, very dirge-like, but with this haunting owl sound at the very end. Eerie. The last movement is entitled Far Away, and it has a very strong Middle Eastern feel to it. The whole movement proceeds like that. A lot of runs in the clarinet with the bassoon underpinning the whole thing. And it keeps going up by half steps and half steps and half steps because it becomes more frenzied until it just stops at the end. Now our last gear shift is to Astor Piazzolla, Argentinian tango composer, very prolific. He lived from, they moved to New York City when he was 4, and they lived there for 12 years. And he started to play this instrument, the bandoneon. Looks like an accordion, but it's very odd. Different, an accordion you can push back and forth on the same note. But this one, when you push, you get one note, and when you pull, you get a different note. So these buttons, there's another series of buttons on the other side. They're not spaced like a keyboard, so it's not necessarily meant to play melodies. It was a folk instrument. It was actually a concertina invented in Germany and brought over to Argentina by immigrants. So the first piece on the program by Piazzolla is Oblivion, one of his most famous pieces. Here is played on the bandoneon. Very beautiful piece. And you'll see the last piece up here, Vayamos al Diablo, let's go to hell. There's no real melody here, but it's just an ostinato that just repeats the whole way to the end. The word ostinato means stubborn in Italian. That's where we get the word obstinate also. And it persistently repeats the whole way to the end, 7 beats to a bar. Not normal 3, 4, 7 beats to a bar. And this will bring our concert to a rousing close. There you are. Quite a contrast from some of the pieces we heard before, but it's quite a varied program, and I hope you enjoy it. Thank you.